Hello, good morning, good afternoon, maybe good evening, everyone. I'm Deco from the Tanzu team, and today we'll talk about Golden Path for platform engineers, and we'll use the example of Tanzu on the private cloud with VMware Cloud Foundation 9, which was a lot of exciting stuff were announced in our session in Explore a couple of weeks ago. We'll do some slides and get to a demo where we'll see how Golden Path can be implemented in action. A little bit, 10 seconds about myself. Spent the first decade of my career in the trenches of Spring and Java. Then joined Yahoo, carried the pager, so became very humble about, hey, if you build it, you got to run it. Was fortunate to join the Cloud Foundry team from the very beginning, part of the founding member of this exciting project through the Pivotal Software commercializing Cloud Foundry, and now Tanzu, VMware, and Broadcom. Since we're going to talk a lot about features that are upcoming, we need this slide. So scroll through this, a little bit of legal stuff that says we are not committed to delivering exactly what you're seeing, and so forth and so on. Okay, let's get started. So I like to, my role, or I'm fortunate to go around the world and talk to a lot of customers and a lot of users of our platform and challenges they see. And there's kind of four basic questions I try to ask when discussing this. And I'd like to pose them here. Of course, you don't need to answer them unless you want to. And it centers around the experience when delivering modern applications, specifically on private cloud. The first question, and all of this is kind of leading to this golden path narrative that is going to accompany us through the presentation. The first question is, how many days between a developer saying, oh, it's working on my laptop, to an app that is actually deployed in production? Is that days, or that's actually months, weeks, years maybe? You know, it's unheard. It's pretty common that we see answers that are measured in 3-digit days between actual production from kind of the laptop. The second question is how many different ways you have to deliver the same type of application to production. So let's say you have a Spring Boot app or a Python app or a Node app with a specific stack. How many different ways you have to deliver, different pipelines, different permutations. And here it's not uncommon that we have 400 plus different ways to deliver Java apps in a large organization with a lot of developers. So another way to put it is, are you in the snowflake business, different types all across the board, or you have consistency and standardization? The third question is, as you are in production or close to production or staging or something that is real, what does it mean to patch and failover? And this is important that it's not just the application, it's also the platform that is behind it. Can you do instant failover? Do you have downtimes of days or hours, or you have more of a process that allows you to patch immediately and maybe even proactively say, hey, let's test things by bringing them down, God forbid, and kind of treat the system as something that can fail over dynamically. And finally, from the app that you have running in production, how out of compliance are they? How many software libraries do you know that needs to be patched, that are older versions that have to be upgraded? The collection of these questions is kind of giving you a sense of where are you in that golden path spectrum. If one side is complete snowflake manual, kind of old school operations and versus agile and golden path velocity. Hopefully it makes sense. So when you look at the modern platform, right, and kind of, it doesn't matter if what runtime you're using, what technologies you're using, it really comes down to three major audiences that you need to cater of. And it turns out that graduating from the t-shirts to outcome is pretty hard. On the development side, there are, and the industries keep talking about this shift left, and it sounds great on slides, but without kind of a consistent standard platform that is simple, this becomes really hard. So for the developers, many patterns to choose from. No need to elaborate. If there are developers on the call, I'm sure you have 5 or 50 different ways to do the exact same thing when you look at technologies out there. It's very hard to discover services and APIs, or in other words, not redo the work that has already been done in your organization or outside of it. And the onboarding and iteration is very, very slow. So from idea to code is almost as difficult as code to production. On the security side, I think part of what happened in the industry with the whole DevOps and Kubernetes and a lot of the trends that we've seen in the last couple of years, and AI is actually accelerating some of this in a bad way, I would say, is there is really no DevOps and infrastructure swim lanes anymore. Like you can go to Klein or you know, cursor, type some prompt, and you know, maybe you get an app that you think can go to production. What about security? What about the DevOps? What about the infrastructure swim lanes? Everything is kind of collapsing a little bit, and we need to be very careful about that. The way we bind to services, there are many, many different ways to bind to services, speaking of how to discover, and that creates a snowflake problem and a patching problem. And as you have this end-to-end path to prod, or your SBOM, your secure build of material, it's really hard to track those artifact integrity and what's actually in the box that you are delivering. From an operational point of view, similar to developers, many, many pipelines, tooling sprawls. We talk to customers that, you know, before we even ask, are you using this? They say, whatever you're going to replace with this, the answer is yes. And different tools that are doing the exact same thing with different UXs. There is no patterns or automation, and if there is automation, it's really automating those snowflakes environment, and it makes it even worse, right? Automation can really help you if you're automating the right thing that is repeatable. And finally, things are not static, right? You're not releasing once a year. That world, hopefully nobody will argue that is long gone behind us. And you need to release, continuous delivery is a fact of life. You have to release your software often. It's part of your business continuity. It's part of your agility. It's core business value of what every organization does. And when you release often, you have to patch often, and you start dealing with complex infrastructure, config drifts. And when you're talking about private cloud in specific, you need to tie this between the platform layer, the middleware layer, and the infrastructure layer as one unit. And that makes it even more complicated. So it turns out that if you have a complex path to production, it really affects your business. This is an example from one of our existing customers before they started adopting Tanzu, a large organization, global organization, which name will, of course, will remain anonymous because it's the actual chart. Every box here is a manual step. This is their documented path to production. So think about how many steps and how many tickets and how many hands-off you need to do in order to get something done. Disconnect between developers and operators. 10 months, speaking to the questions that we talked about before, over 10 months from concept to production. Very poor developer to admin ratio. So almost one admin for every 5 developers. And what makes it even worse, than over 60% of the developer time is spent on non-code related topics, things that bring nothing, no value to the business. And if that's not bad enough, then over 3 weeks to fix critical vulnerabilities, not surprising if you have lack of standardization, lack of automation, and so on. So enough with the scary part. Let's talk about what does it mean to shift to a golden path mindset. So first of all, it means that you bring back those secured swim lanes between what developers are doing, what app operations are doing, what platform operations are doing. And there are 3 main areas that I'd like to highlight or suggest to you that are going to help you with thinking differently on your way to a golden path. The first one is, and I'm saying this more from a platform architectural point of view, and the developers will be the consumer of this. So it's more from a PE plus architecture viewpoint of the world. The first is design common application architecture. Identify those repeated deployment patterns. If we talked about Spring Boot, for example, or a web frontend with an API, or a chatbot with an MCP attached to it, or some data store that creates a workflow of some kind. Identify those repeated deployment patterns. You'll be surprised that you're not going to have hundreds. You're going to have as I mentioned, this example of 400 different ways to do Spring Boot. After this customer engaged with Tanzu, they ended up with 2 ways instead of 400. So if you identify those repeated patterns, you are also limiting the amount of permutation that you have by order or orders of magnitude. The second principle is aim for the highest abstraction possible. I'll talk later about kind of the PaaS versus CaaS layer and each one of the container as a service versus platform as a service. There's area or existent for both, but use them in the right way. If you do not need access to Kubernetes, don't give that. It doesn't help you giving access to a CaaS layer where, in fact, you have a known simple 12-factor pattern that you can push to a PaaS. And same goes to if you can push it to a function or so. Always aim for the highest abstraction possible. Every time I talk about it, it seems trivial, but it's amazing how ineffective or large organizations are addressing this. Usually it's like the developers are screaming they want kubectl access, so let's give it to them, not thinking about if they need it or don't need it. So a key principle of Golden Path is always aim for the highest abstraction possible. On the path to production, so this is the common architecture. Then you have the path to production for each architecture, automated delivery pipelines per patterns. So meaning you have a kind of a pipeline per architectural pattern. Even if that pipeline has manual steps, I'd like to call them golden ditches, that's fine, as long as it's repeatable. I've seen examples where large banks, for example, are trying to modernize and go to Golden Path, and in their path to production, there are still people going to a bunker and typing something on a mainframe in a console that looks like 1930s. That's okay, as long as it's happening standard in a consistent way across everything they're doing. Not everything has to be automated, but it has to be standardized if you want to be successful for each, and try to map those patterns or those deployment pipelines into each patterns you identified as common. And then think about the self-service UX, not just for app teams, right? We talked a lot about, this is pretty trivial or not trivial, pretty well known that you want self-service for your developers. But what about your platform teams? The platform teams need an API and self-service as well. They need the simplicity. It's not the UX. It's not just about the developers. And I think now we're on the verge of another revolution here with MCPs specifically and agents, where we have the opportunity for the agents to automate a lot of what we're doing in the CI/CD process itself. This is very early. There's a lot of hype and confusion there. But I think AI can be a pretty interesting golden path accelerator or facilitators, if you will, not by adding features to the application. That's great. Add a chatbot, add an image processor, add a vector database, whatever. That's great and important. But also, it can revolutionize the way we're doing DevOps in the very near future. Sorry, and one more thing. But this also presents an opportunity to do it wrong if you're not in Golden Path. So if you'll use the agents, for example, to automate every snowflake, then you're going to make your life even worse than they are today. And on the fleet management and app infrastructure, this is specifically related to private cloud environments. design things from day zero to start versus generic configs. So don't kind of say, oops, it's successful, now we got to scale it. Think about how you design it from scratch to be kind of scalable, and reduce the dependencies on a single AZ cluster service where possible. You will see a little bit in the demo how we're thinking about, at least in the VCF plus Tanzu land, how we're thinking about these modular abstracted infrastructure entities that are spanning the physical infrastructure patterns. I think public clouds have introduced that long ago, and it's kind of pretty successful in thinking about zones and regions. On the private cloud, this is still very complicated, and I think you'll see the work that is coming from VMware as pretty innovative in that pattern. Okay, so a lot of discussion around CAS, PAS. So just spending a few minutes on, if you think about CAS, this is what the application developer needs to worry about. The runtime, the middleware, the scaling, this is what a platform can take care of. So still a lot of effort needs to run it. On a PaaS layer, which is what we're going to focus as kind of a way to do golden path, there is much more thing. The platform does everything for you essentially aside from the application. You get your code, you run it, and you really don't care how. So it's a very different approach, but it's also much more opinionated. So if you have Helm charts or COTS app or highly customized stateful workloads, maybe CAS is a better approach. If you have custom development that you can be very opinionated on, web apps, APIs, agents, this would be a great place to run for platform as a service. And not surprisingly, when you think about PaaS and the outcomes that specific customers achieve with Tanzu, so instead of that 5 to 1, you're talking about 200. This is actually average. So a lot of our large customers are in the 400, almost double that, 400 to 1 developer to platform engineers, with enormous reduction in unplanned app downtime. So it turns out this opinions and automation can drive faster patching. Developer productivity, 500x or 5x improvement in productivity. And the time it takes to patch and deploy apps is also significantly reduced. So there is direct statistics, and this is not from the last year. This is across a decade plus, or even more than a decade, that these technologies are running in large enterprises across tens and thousands of apps. That it's proven time and time again that golden path drives business outcomes directly. Okay. Let's take one step further and talk about the golden APIs. So we talked about the path, but what are the actual APIs, especially from a platform point of view, that you want to focus on? And I like to call it the, how you simplify, how you standardize, and how you automate. And golden APIs is another way of saying opinions, right? So build and deploy. Containerized source to artifact generation. We'll talk about build packs and the way this is done, at least in Tanzu in the demo. But the point here is that there is a default way to get source to containers without the developers influencing this, without writing Docker files, and without affecting different permutation. Part of those 400 ways of doing the same thing is that there is so much optionality in how you actually build the code that is unnecessary and unneeded. Then the deployment has to start from a declarative manifest, where you basically say, this is my source, my services, and is infrastructure agnostic, which means that it doesn't matter if I deploy it on a public cloud or a private cloud. It doesn't matter if I'm bound to Postgres or MySQL, or if I'm bound to a GPT OSS or whatever model of your choice, or Anthropic, or your on-prem models. It's this binding, services will behave the same from an app point of view. And then it's up to the platform to dynamically create and wires the underlying networking and middleware. So it's almost like the platform is in service of the developers. It's in service of the app. It has to automate things so the app can be deployed. The second API is around binding. Binding between its developer-friendly API, bind to a database, GenAI, or external services, and manage that as a service. So think about the RDS experience, but on-prem. Database as a service with a binding directly into the developer environment. All the auth token and auto configuration and secret isolation has to be automated and auto configured. So developers and app operators even should not worry about secret management and what credentials should be injected as they connect to their database. And ideally, you can do all of that with an API first approach, specifically when you're talking about GenAI with an agent-based approach, as we mentioned. And then scale should be one API. So this sometimes sounds to customers, especially as they start working with us, as a myth. I can do a Tanzu scale minus instances 100 and it just works. But as you start thinking about rolling upgrades, elastic capacity, multiple availability zone, fleet management, where the policies are baked in and network isolation is controlled by the platform and you don't have to worry about service mesh and things like that, this becomes a reality. So scale can really be an API. And this is probably the hardest. I don't think you can do the scale without doing the build and bind as golden path. But so I see this as a progression, but I think those are important principles to actually implement this. Hopefully you'll stop me with questions if there's any. And the last thing about kind of the golden API patterns or principles is from a pure platform operations, what if you can follow these 3 R's, as we call them, repair, repave, rotate, in your operations. So you can repair CVEs immediately as they come out, instead of, you probably know, and if not, you can follow the news about every outage that happened in the last 5-10 years. It's always, the fix is almost always there. It just hasn't been implemented fast enough. Because if you want to patch 400 different things, it's pretty hard instead of patching one way. So it all comes together. Standardization has direct impact on repair. Repaving, rotating credentials. Do that often, do that as part of the platform. Don't rely on developers to remember to rotate their credentials or certificate. And finally, repaving, which is the most innovative, fun stuff here, is instead of babysitting a virtual machine and say, my whole job is never to let this thing down, proactively bring it down often, crash of course, do it in a way that doesn't bring your applications down, but do a restaging of the application, or a repaving of the servers so you can handle threats much more efficiently. And by the way, this may sound as science fiction, but today, in the last years, we have very large banks that are doing this on a weekly basis in production, and it works really, really well, as long as you have a platform underneath that can take care of that. Okay, I want to spend a couple of minutes on Tanzu. I don't want to kind of overload with marketing, blah, blah, just give you a sense of what we're doing here, and then jump into a demo. So Tanzu mission, we drive business velocity from idea to code and code to production. We can run on private or public clouds. In this specific webinar, we're going to focus on what we're doing on private clouds. There is a set of developer services, build services, data services, AI, and marketplace. We cater modern application and Gen AI. Essentially, we are a PaaS that is highly tuned toward modern workloads, specifically agentic and 12-factor web applications and custom build code. In the context of VCF, and this is not a VCF webinar, I encourage you to go and learn more about VCF 9, a lot of important stuff happening there. Specifically, Tanzu fits in as part of the advanced services with our data services capability, our application services, and our AI services. And we fit right into the kind of alongside the CAS. So VCF has a built-in CAS layer, And when you add Tanzu, you get CAS and PAS. And as I mentioned, those are, there's room for both. You're getting them side by side on the same powerful IIS platform with a unified marketplace, by the way. I'm going to go through that in the demo, so we'll kind of go through that relatively quickly. When Tanzu is deployed on VCF, or the Tanzu platform is deployed on VCF, we leverage the VCF organizations and region and bring forth this elastic upfront capacity or capabilities to allow you to do serverless, elastic availability and resiliency, auto scaling, continuous compliance, and so on. So the ability to patch apps with zero downtime, automate vulnerability repair, and do reporting and observability and all of that. Next. This is the claim to fame of this platform. To me, this is the best implementation. I'm biased, but it's the best implementation in the industry of what Golden Path actually means. CF Push done all those plumbing that you need in order to build your code, from capacity, configure apps, runtime, configure middleware, GitOps, libraries, packaging, gateways, and so on and so on, load balancing, mesh, and so on, building the container, log collection. It's doing, this would take, I was just with a customer this morning that was describing this as 85 days. And in a pilot with us, there was like, oh, I can do it in 2 minutes. No, maybe not 45 seconds, but 2 minutes. So just describe your app, give us your source code, services you want to deploy, and push it. Of course, this means opinions. This means it's done in a certain way. And not every developer gets to decide whatever they want to do. But that's the simplified operation and opinions for PE and self-service for devs. Maybe a couple of we're not going to go into a lot of this, but I just want to highlight that there is much more in the Tanzu platform than just the CF push, from app visibility to blue-green deployments to runtime services, observability, compliance validation. So we're doing a lot of work specifically for Spring, and a lot of things that will help you with the metric collection, dashboarding, and so on. So take a minute to kind of just understand what developer services are included. We're going to cover some of them in the demo. AI, there is no presentation without AI. So I think the cool thing about AI, or Gen AI specifically, is that it really fits great into PaaS. PaaS is kind of resurrected, if you will, as the best place to run AI agent. Don't take my word for that. Just listen to the CEO of OpenAI, listen to the CEO of Microsoft. Like, there is a lot of conversation about what agentic actually means and what do I need in order to run this. So when you run agentic, you really want a PaaS underneath, and not something, the simplicity, the predictability, and the opinions of a PaaS layer underneath. So what we're doing, we are basically adding specific path to production features and guardrails on model serving or model consumption, I would say, by developers, API services, a lot of work with data and MCP tools and vector store. And we're doing all of this with a high degree of governance and assurance. For those of you who played with MCP, as one example, or with RAG architectures, especially if you're looking at public models, there is a long way for the industry to go to successfully enforce compliance and model governance and so on. So we're doing a lot of that from the AI middleware point of view. And with that, I think we're ready for the demo. So what I want to skip some of these slides. What I want you to think about as you see the demo is those kind of quotes or reactions from some of the customers we are sharing this with, from an app dev point of view, from a security point of view, and from an operational point of view. And I think those are pretty powerful statements of kind of what is the value customers see in all of that, if that makes sense. Okay, so we are at the bottom of the hour, give or take. So let's switch from slides to live stuff. So from now on, everything is live. So I'm expecting at least one thing to go wrong. So let's see how we're doing. So we're going to start by logging into the VCF9 portal. And the demo flow we're going to do is we're going to deploy a PaaS, we're going to build a standard application, and then we're going to enhance that application with RAG, and then enhance it again with MCP. And we're going to see how all of that is done using a golden path principles of one standard, simple deployment, and so on. We're going to start by where we want that PaaS to be. So VCF, and again, I apologize if some of these concepts are not familiar. Please go and watch some of the VCF introduction talk. This webinar assumes you have some knowledge on VCF 9 already. So there is an organization, which is kind of would be your large entity, your line of business. And within that organization, we created an organization called DECT Business Unit. And we can assign regional quotas and network configuration and VPCs. So we're going to have boundaries at the global layer of that organization. That has nothing to do with the PaaS. It's for everything that you're deploying. It's kind of the world you're living in. That DECT business unit has that regional network configuration and quota. And as we switch roles from the infrastructure admin to the organizational admin, we can see that we have two projects here. Think about projects as some kind of line within the line of business, some kind of project or tasks or a group that is responsible for a certain amount of application. In this case, we created this project called DECT Applications. And within those, we have namespaces, not to be confused with the Kubernetes namespace, but those are the environment in which we're actually deploying app. We're going to focus on one environment called the Tanzu Barnyard, because this is the app we're going to deploy, or the set of applications we're going to deploy. And we can see that we have certain services here, and one of them, of course, being the PaaS, which we're going to use. And we're also going to inherit the users from our central location, in this case, DECT admin. So once we've done all of that, we can deploy the PaaS. And here the fun starts, because as a developer, we'll start from the development and then work our way up and down for the infrastructure side. As a developer, when I get a login or an API endpoint, here is the user that we mentioned before, DECT admin. Here is the org that we mentioned, the project, and here is the actual space where we're going to deploy the infrastructure. And then the app that we're going to deploy first, that we're going to do this magic thing called CF push or golden path go. And we're going to come back. We'll let it run for a minute. We're going to come back and see what is happening here. But this is it. This is what I'm defining as my application. I give it a name. Here is my source code. This could be a get repo as well. This is the kind of how I want to build it centrally, not Docker files. Use this recipe. In this case, I want to force the system to use a certain Java version. And here is a set of services I'm connected to. Now, if I go and look a little bit on the operation side of this, so this is the Tanzu operational portal, where I mentioned that it can run on public or private cloud. So it all starts here with the director into vSphere. And in this case, if this would be on AWS, because we're using VCF, of course, we are bound into the vSphere environment. But if I would run it on Amazon or Google, I would see here a GCP director, AWS director, or an Azure director. So we support all public clouds. It will be the exact same experience. But of course, we're doing much more on VCF, being part of Broadcom with a lot of network integration and so on.
Hey, Deco, I think this is actually a really great opportunity to ask a question that we just got. So question came in basically stating, we're using a sovereign cloud service provider using BCD to provide cloud services. How does this roadmap and the Tanzu platform story fit into a cloud service provider's requirements?
So that's a great question. Essentially, what will happen is the PaaS layer will sit on top of the IaaS layer that is provided by the service provider. So think about it as just another cloud destination. Everything else that you're seeing is exactly the same. So the beauty of Tanzu is that there is a layer that is connected to the infrastructure, the cloud provider interface, and northbound of that, everything is exactly the same. So the marketplace services would be whatever you want to offer there as a, so every box here, if you will, can be things that you want to offer as a service provider to your developers. If you want to offer a database or Gen AI models or message queue or caching, those things will be installed on those service provider IIS layer and will look to the developers exactly the same as they would consume it anywhere else.
Perfect. Thank you, Dekel. Yep, I think so.
Okay. So if I go to one example here and click on status, you see that you'll see here that under my compute environment, I have this long list of very crazy names of virtual machines. So everything we're going to deploy is actually going to create as containers inside those virtual machines. So Tanzu handles the entire container orchestration and deployment and management. And you don't see that, you don't care about this. There is no container API. It's just fluff or stuff that is happening for you under the covers. And Tanzu can also, if a VM is going to go down, Tanzu will make sure it brings up another VM and redeploy your workloads there to always maintain high availability. From a Gen AI point of view, very quickly, as one example, there is a similar example for databases. We have this thing called Gen AI services or tiles, where you can define plans across public models, private models, as well as integrations with all the major players, including running it on your own infrastructure, running it on vSphere, VCF private AI, and so on. And it doesn't matter where you run it as private AI integration or running it on your own environment, the plan configuration for your developers looks exactly the same. So that's the model the developers will see, which we're going to see in a second as we progress in the demo. Okay, so we are long overdue to look at our apps. So here is the developer view. If you remember the org, deck the apps, the user, deck the admin, and here is our space. We're going to look at that space now. We have backend environment that we deployed before a couple of hours ago, and this is what we just deployed. If we click on that, we see that we have my music store. You can see my taste in music. Oops, sorry, forgot to delete that. Previous demos, okay, ignore that second. And I have a database, nothing too exciting here so far. Let's see what the CF push did. So as we push this, remember, this is the only thing we provided. There is no VMs here, there is no containers, there is no service mesh, there is no config maps and all of that infrastructure stuff that developers have to deal with. It's a pass. Just give me my code, run it for me. So what CF push does, creates a route, download the build packs. It can actually identify the appropriate build packs per your code. So this is a Java example, but we support all major languages, .NET, Python, Go, PHP, and so on. We define security group rules between the containers. So one container cannot access another container if it's not permitted to. All of that is done by the platform. We optimize the JVM. There is tons of optimization we're doing around the OpenJDK for memory calculations and so on. We create DNS, certificate management, security provider. We're building all of that stuff into the container. It's called a cell or Diego cell, and then we're starting the app with a live URL attached to it. So from code to API or from code to URL, a couple of seconds. This took maybe a minute while we were talking, and then we have the app running. So this is really, really powerful. We also bound to a database. We'll talk about that in a second. But as you can see, there is a little bit of a problem with this application. It says Tanzu AI Boneyard, but there's no AI. So let's actually fix that by going here, looking at our app in services. Let's just renew our session. It's a good thing. And here you see that there is a set of services that are bound to this app. I already bound it into a database. Now let's create a new service called GenAI. We're gonna, if you remember the tile from a platform point of view, here it's how it's looking from a developer point of view with all these different plans. We support what we call multi-plan. So in this case, we're gonna need RAG that has embedding and the model itself. So we're gonna select this one plan. The developer doesn't have to understand the difference between embedding and models. It's kind of in both, kind of two in one. We're going to select this plan. We're going to call it Barnyard LLM, and we're going to bind it. So you see the marketplace into the application. We're going to bind it. We're going to make sure we have it here. And now we're going to restart the app. While we are restarting, I'm just using a restart. But at the same time, I could go to here, add a route, map it to the existing application, and do a do a more interesting blue-green deployment. So I don't have to restart. I have V1, V2 waiting in the background, and then I just switch the traffic between V1 and V2. So those patterns are also available. In this case, I chose to restart, but you see even the restart was pretty quick. Now I can go here, refresh, and here is my chatbot. I see that there is a new service here called Barnyard LLM. We're actually going to ask it a question. First of all, let's see that it identifies and likes us. Hi there. We're going to ask, who is the artist Tanzu? So this is a new, very exciting artist that the model should not be aware of because it was never trained on it. So let's fix that. Let's add a new album called Secret Sauce. So this is how I use embeddings. The artist will be Tanzu. Release year, let's say this year, punk metal, Ozzy Osbourne, rest in peace. Really like the song Iron Sauce, and we'll give it a user score. Now, what actually happened behind the scene, here is the new album. It was written to the database, that's nothing fancy, but then it was also the embedding service created a vectorized version of this and told this to the model about this. So now when I'm going to ask that question again, let's just copy and type it. The model should be aware of it because it has new context. So now it should be aware that Tanzu is a new artist, and yes, it knows Iron Horse. Ozzy really liked the fact, and I can interact with the models as Ozzy Who, for example, to see that this is an actual model that knows. Yeah, that's embarrassing a little bit. It's the OSS version of GPT, so it doesn't know. It's not aware yet that Ozzy passed away. But okay, it is what it is. So it gives us ability to interact with new data that comes to the organization that is only ours, and data that is in the public domain, and do it in the same way. But let's make it a little bit more interesting. Let's say we want to ask, do we have support issues? Now, if we're going to ask this question now, the model will just give us some hallucination that I'll spare you. It doesn't know anything about our support tickets or anything about our existing enterprise environment. So let's fix that. What we're going to do here is show you a little bit of the MCP capabilities within the Tanzu platform. I'm just going to go here into front end, click on services again, and then bind a new. This time I'm binding, I'm not creating, and I'm going to select support MCP agent. What I've done here, and restart again. What I've done here is I created a connection between the app and an existing MCP server. In this case, the MCP server sits in a different space in my organization. It could sit anywhere. It can be something that doesn't even run on Tanzu, right? It can be a public MCP server, like what's the price of Bitcoin? It can be some kind of a proxy to a legacy environment. It can be a lot of different things. In this case, I'm using the support assistant, which is connected into two types of databases. So now you can see that we also support Rabbit and MySQL. This is where I stored my support cases. This is where I communicate the interaction between the support cases in the app. And what I'm doing within my binding is making sure that the model now has access to the tools, as it's called, into the MCP tools. And if I'll go in and refresh the app again, now I can see that I have a third unit here called support MCP agent. And if I ask this question again, do we have support issues? Hopefully it will go and make a tool call into the MCP agent, identify the support cases and bring it back to me. And yes, it works. You see we have two support cases. One is for the 2012 album by Rush, and the other one is for Pink Floyd Animals. By the way, both of these support cases are real. This is my vinyl collection. Now you know a little bit more about me. And I have those two issues, which are pretty funny. So now we've seen how we connect to the RAG implementation using vector database when we added a new album, but also how we connect into an MCP environment to connect our, let's say, legacy enterprise environments. And finally, the last thing I want to show you is how I observed all of that. So Tanzu comes with a built-in hub that, so I need the password here. So close your eyes for 1 minute while I copy this password. If anyone is quick enough, they are welcome to use this. Oops. Okay. Okay. Come on. Third time the charm, right? Yay. Okay. So this is the hub. This sits as a way to visualize the observability of both the platform and the application. We can see that we have multiple foundations here, 2 foundations for production and all the apps that are running across them. I can see the platform health. I can see specific container management. Remember, those are the cells that we looked at. You see all the VMs that are involved across these different foundations, all the apps. I can collaborate those foundations into a single group if I want, and so on. And then I can also look at the apps. So we deployed this business application called, let's make it a little bigger maybe, okay, called Tanzu Boneyard. And if I click on that, I can actually see that I have backend, frontend. This is the new stuff we just deployed. I have 6 services attached to it. We didn't talk about the gateway in this session, but I can also do an API gateway into this. Here is our support MCP agent, our LLM, and our database. And if I click on the front end, I can go into details of the app, and I can see the specific in topology, performance, logs, and so on. But I can also, if you remember when I talked about Golden Path, one of the first questions I ask is like, how do I know about software vulnerabilities and how out of date? So I can go and look directly at my repositories and figure out all of the apps that I have here, including the one we deployed. What does it, how many upgrades, how far it is from current releases, how much I need to do the upgrades, what is the low effort, high effort, what will be the impact before and after the upgrade. And if I go to a specific application, let's say Pet Clinic, this is not one of the apps we deployed, but I can go into existing CVs and libraries and see specific environment that I've encountered and see specific CVs that I need to know about. So that concludes our demo. And I'd like to open it up for questions right now. And thank you very much for listening. Any questions?
Yeah. I don't think there's additional ones that have been dropped in there. I will add, if you're interested in learning more about some of the announcements that we had at, VMware Explore, I'm going to drop a few links into the chat here, as well as I also, Deco, you just did a great demo on Tanzu Hub. I actually had just completed a Tanzu Hub blog series. And so if you're interested in learning more about what is Tanzu Hub and how does Tanzu Hub help me really get a better understanding for my entire application estate, you can check out that blog series as well. And so I'm dropping those in the chat now. I don't know if don't think there's any additional ones that came in. But if you've got questions, we still have another 9 minutes. We would love to be able to answer any additional questions you might have live.
We'll give it a little bit of time to see if anyone has any additional questions, but just a note here, this has been recorded and will be available on demand. The same page that you use to register for this event, the recording will be on that page. We'll also include the links that Darren put in here in the chat, and any additional resources. I'll get together with the team and we'll add them to that page as well. So you don't have to search through this chat or any post-event emails. If you just go to the same page that you're viewing this on, you scroll down a little bit, and you'll be able to see some of the relevant assets, including the blog series and the 10.3 blog that Darren also wrote.
And maybe a couple of things to add while people are maybe shy or not. So I demoed kind of how you create services from a marketplace. Those services are not only Tanzu, so you can bring your own services, you can connect to third parties, you can do cloud service brokers to outside environments from public clouds, you can connect to services that are running on your private cloud outside of Tanzu. So the classic example will be, I run this COTS app on a CAS running on VCF, but I want to consume it as a developer from a PaaS running on VCF. So these are all supported built-in features that you will see in the marketplace. So it's not just, it doesn't have to run on the PaaS in order to be consumed in that standard automatic way through the service.
Yeah, and I think it's also worth bringing some clarity to that too, Deckel. Like when we say CAS on VCF, container as a service platform, there we're really referring to something like VMware or vSphere Kubernetes service or VKS, what used to be TKGS. And so just making sure we're bringing some clarity to that. But we do actually have another question from Keith, Deckel. This is a good one. How difficult was it to build the process by which the developer just needed to commit his code to deploy this application? In the demo, it looks really easy. And so how difficult is it to build that out? Yeah.
It actually really, really easy. Like I can tell you that this demo, you can build it with Klein from the difficult part here is what CF push does. That's the heavy lifting. There is no flow. CF push essentially takes care of everything that you've seen here. It looks easy, but it's because the platform does a lot of the stuff for you. You really, as a developer, all you need to do is put a name to your app, a code of where to deploy, and the rest the platform does. It's that easy. You don't have, there is no image registries here. There is no config maps. There is no service IPs. I didn't hide anything. That's the simplicity of a PaaS. What you've seen is what the developer experiences. It's really, really easy.
Yeah, and I'll also add too, I mean, there's no Docker image building or anything like that. When you do that CF push command as a developer, it's going in and it's actually detecting what language or framework is that app, or is this code written in, and then it uses a build pack to behind the scenes to actually build that image on its own, so that's not even a step that the developer has to worry about. And it'll handle the build process, it'll handle the deployment, all of those things, setting up the routes. So literally it is just as easy as what Deckel demoed.
Yeah, and even the databases, right? When I bound into that Boneyard database, you didn't see me worry about the credentials. Those credentials are dynamically created by the platform and injected into the as part of the service binding. So there is no secrets that you need to manage and worry about and go to YAML hell in order to understand what's going on, and then do it again as you want to rotate those credentials, or not rotate because you're saying, oh, it works, so I'm not going to touch it. I'm never going to rotate the secret, right? So this is proactively happening by the platform periodically as policies set by the platform engineer. So those credentials are being rotated. So that's also a part that I didn't hide. It's just as easy as it gets with Tanzu.
Yeah, and that's really the goal, right? It's all about helping drive consistency in platform operations. It's so that developers aren't having to open maybe service tickets with central IT to figure out, hey, I need a database created, I need credentials to attach to that database, and now all of a sudden I have credentials that are now my responsibility and I have to protect them, and so if something were to happen and something would get compromised, that's now something I have to be concerned with as a developer, where in the case of Tanzu platform, the platform is managing all of that through automation for me. And again, taking that opinionated approach actually brings even greater consistency to the operational aspects of this as well. Any additional questions? That was a good one, Keith.
While we wait, just give it another minute. Deckel, if anyone has any other questions outside of this webinar, what would be the best place for them to either get a hold of you, or is there a contact us form that we can share with them so they can also reach out to the team here?
Feel free to reach out to me on best ways through Twitter or like at
LinkedIn.
LinkedIn, Deckel, Tankel. Any channel is good. Don't be shy.
There you go. Every channel. You reach out to Deckel on every channel.
I'm not gonna give you my cell number, but everything else is fair game.
Excellent. Well, it looks like there are no other questions here. So I do want to just give a special thank you to Deckel, to Darren for joining us today for today's webinar. Deckel, that was excellent. Thank you for sharing your slides, sharing the demo. This has been recorded, so you will live on forever here in the Tanzu webinar sphere with this great content, and we hope to have you back for another webinar. So we look forward to working with you again in the future. For everyone who's in attendance here live, thank you for joining us. For those who are in attendance on demand or in the future, welcome. Thank you for attending today. We hope to see you guys in the next event. Everyone have a great week. I'll talk to you guys soon.
Thank you very much.
Bye all.
Thank you.